Ja, jeg vil bare sige velkommen til dette symposium om langtidsprognose ved skizofreni. Jeg har lige været lidt panikslagen her, fordi nummer 2 foredragsholder, han kan ikke finde det. Men han er på vej, håber vi. Ellers så bytter vi om på rækkefølge nummer 2 eller 3. Men jeg skal introducere den første foredragsholder, som er Lennart Lundin, som ska fortælle om prognosen vid schizofreni.
Tack. Och tack för inbjudan. Det som jag ska prata om är en resultat från en studie som SBU, alltså Statens beredning för medicinsk utvärdering, gjorde och som publicerades i november 2012. Alltså den är en alldeles ny. Jag satt med i 2 av de grupperna. Dels att ta fram underlaget för läkemedelsbehandling vid schizofreni och sen också det som patientens deltagande. Det som jag berättade väldigt kort om innan lunch. I den här forskningsgenomgången så har vi också gjort en genomgång om vad vet vi egentligen om prognosen för schizofreni, och bakgrunden till att vi har gjort det är, jag kan läsa då, de råd en behandlare kan ge en person med schizofrenisjukdom om hur länge hon eller han ska behöva ta antipsykosmedicin och om risken för återfall är naturligtvis avhängigt synen på prognosen och långtidsförlopp. Anser man att sjukdomen är episodisk och har ett benignt förlopp, alltså ett väldigt gynnsamt förlopp, blir rekommendationen annorlunda jämfört med om kliniken anser att sjukdomen har ett mycket långvarigt förlopp och att olika behandlingsinsatser kommer att behövas under lång tid. Och i den här översikten tas huvudsakligen upp studier som studerat på prognosen på kort och medellång sikt, alltså 2-3 år. Och det som jag kommer att prata om är ungefär det här, alltså att prata om diagnossystemens betydelse, hur olika syn på diagnoser, vad det får för betydelse, utfallsmåttens betydelse, alltså det här med vad mäter man egentligen, vad är det som man har tittat på i de här studierna. Designen, alltså då hur man har lagt upp de här uppföljningsstudierna, hur man har valt ut sina grupper och vad man vet om det. Hanteringen av bortfall, och sen så kommer jag att göra en sammanfattning av äldre studier, och jag ska berätta vad jag menar med äldre studier, eller vilka studier som jag menar. Och sen lite om kvalitetskraven i den här sammanställningen som SBU har gjort. Alltså vad är det som vi har, vilka krav på kvalitet har vi haft, och sen lite resultaten kring det. Så det här är liksom genomgången så som jag tänker göra den. Som ni vet så har det ju varit så att när diagnosen schizofreni en gång formulerades för ungefär 100 år sedan, så hade man då en ganska pessimistisk syn på utkomsten, eller hur gick det, prognosen. Sen så publicerades på 80- och 90-talet en serie studier som hade en annan syn på prognosen. En mycket mer hoppfull syn, och då var det sådana namn som Manfred Bloiler, Luke Chomsky, Courtney Harding, Glyn Harrison. Alltså det som Glyn Harrison gjorde WHO:s stora studie, och Norman Sartorius då och det är de också som vi granskar lite i de här. Och diagnossystemen har under åren varierat väldigt mycket. Alltså vad man har kallat schizofreni har varierat genom åren. Och beroende egentligen på varje ny uppdatering av både DSM-systemet, amerikanska, och ICD-systemet, det är WHO:s klassifikationssystem. Och en väldigt avgörande punkt i diagnosen, det är det här, vilket varaktighetskriterien har man använt. Alltså hur länge ska man ha haft tydliga symptom och eller funktionsnedsättningar för att kunna få en schizofrenidiagnos eller kvalificera sig för en schizofrenidiagnos. Och då är det så att i de gamla systemen eller de gamla studier, det finns, Skandinavien har en väldigt stor tradition utav långtidsuppföljningsstudier. Det finns fantastiska danska studier, Erik Strömgrens studier till exempel. Det fanns norska studier och det fanns några svenska studier. Men som var och en definierade schizofreni på sitt sätt. Och sen när de stora diagnossystemen kom, DSM och ICD kom, så började de att försöka ha någon slags mer reliabla diagnoser. Och det går en skiljelinje mellan DSM i version 3 och ena sidan och ICD-9 och de här nya DCD. Här går gränsen, den reviderade versionen utav DSM-3 och sen DSM-4 och DSM-4 TR och nu är vi ju snart inne i DSM-5 och sen ICD-10. Och skillnaden där är varaktigheten. Och det får enormt stor betydelse över hur man diagnostiserar. Därför att det är en väldigt stor skillnad i prognos mellan de gamla systemen. Det finns en studie som vi tittade på där man diagnostiserade exakt samma patientgrupp med de olika systemen. I ICD-9 så fick 128 patienter en schizofrenidiagnos. I ICD-10 105 och DSM-4 så fick 94. Man har omdiagnostiserat till exempel Manfred Bloilers patientgrupp, den som han skrev sin studie om. Och använder man de nya diagnoskriterierna så får man en mycket, mycket mindre grupp. Alltså en snävare grupp med som har mycket tydliga funktionsnedsättningar. De nya diagnossystemen definierar en grupp med väldigt tydliga funktionsnedsättningar. Långvarig tydlig funktionsnedsättning. Så det är en sak, något i vågskålen kring detta. En annan sak som gäller utfallsmåtten. Alltså en del av de här studierna, till exempel Courtney Hardings studie, är väldigt vagt definierade mått. Om man har a good life eller ej. Och då finns det några fallstudier som då är det bland annat en kvinna som Courtney Hardings grupp beskriver som ett bra utfall. Då är det en kvinna som är i 65-årsåldern. Hon har hela sitt liv varit allvarligt sjuk, tillbringat 25 år eller 30 år på sjukhus, flera år i maximum security wards. Har liksom aldrig någonsin arbetat. Har som sagt ett liv på sjukhus. Nu lever hon oerhört ett mycket, mycket stillsamt liv när hon bor hos sin syster. Hennes aktivitet är att hon 2 dagar i veckan går till något aktivitetscentrum och syster ger henne medicinerna. Det tycker Courtney Harding är ett good life. Alltså då ska man säga att till en ung nyinsjuknad patient att det kan gå så bra som den här patienten. Titta här. Alltså överhuvudtaget när ni läser de här studierna, gå till källan. Läs dem inte i Alain Topor eller Kullbergs silade genom dem. De nya studierna har en helt annan kvalitet på uppföljningsmått. Alltså de symptomremission, sociala funktioner, arbetsstudier, boende, livskvalitet, hur mycket man är i behandling, ibland har man något sammanslagna mått. Och sen kognition, då alltså neuropsykologiskt fungerande, har de flesta där. Design, alltså ibland är det obegripligt vilka grupper som egentligen följs. Alltså den Courtney Hardings Vermont-studie som är så oerhört uppskriven. Det är omöjligt att begripa sig på hur den gruppen såg ut en gång i tiden. Den är från avdelningar som finns på ett sjukhus i Vermont. Väljer man ut patienter, de har suttit där i 20-25 år, men man väljer ut dem till ett aktivt rehabprogram och sen så ser man efter uppföljningstiden på 10-15 år att en del har det gått ganska bra för. Men man vet ju ingenting om hur ursprungsgruppen ser ut. Alltså och det är, alltså ibland står det ingenting om det. Man vet inte, och det gäller egentligen alla de här stora grupperna. Det är alltså inte så att det är uppföljningar utav personer som i ett visst område som har fått en schizofrenidiagnos, utan det är uppföljningar som några råkade hamna på ett sjukhus någonstans och sen fick de något rehabprogram och sen följer man upp hur det går. Det finns några, det som kallas födelsekohortstudier, birth cohort studies, och det är sådana där man följer upp alla personer som föds i ett visst område och sen följer man dem. Det finns en fantastisk studie som heter 1966 North Finland Birth Study, där man tittar på alla personer som är födda i de 3 Lapplandslänen i Finland. De föddes 1966 och sen har man följt den gruppen och sen har man tittat på de 58 människor som har fått en schizofrenidiagnos, hur har det gått för dem. Men det finns få av dem. Det finns några sådana kognitionsstudier också som är så här långa. Men annars är det, alltså man fattar inte hur de är gjorda. Och sen är det då, många av de här studierna har fullständigt gigantiska bortfall. Alltså det är bortfall som, alltså, eftersom designen är så dålig så förstår man inte hur stort bortfallet är, eftersom de inte räknas på ursprungsgrupperna. Hardings grupp är ju en oerhört selekterad grupp som är när någon har varit sjuk i 25 år. Alltså man vet inte hur bortfallet är, och även i de som man då inte, eller som det här är lite mer, det finns lite bättre siffror, så är det de här WHO-studierna som ni säkert har läst om och som finns refererat i en del läroböcker, som säger att den här myten som att det går bättre i u-länderna än i industriländerna till exempel, att u-länderna har en bättre prognos, vilket är oerhört tveksamt om det stämmer. De har till exempel vad gäller schizofreni så är det 25% är inte återfunna, 25% är döda, och de 49% som man hittar då efter 26 år, tror jag det var i den här WHO-studien, så har 16% en bra prognos, en riktigt bra prognos. Men alltså återfallet vet man ju inte någonting om. Och sen den riktigt stora svagheten, hur ska man hantera döda? Någonting som är jätteintressant, det är att i medicinen i övrigt så räknas död som det värsta utfallet som man kan göra. Man skämtar ju om ibland att den galne kirurgen som säger att operationen lyckades men patienten dog tyvärr. Så är psykiater. Alltså jag är inte psykiater, jag är alltså psykolog. Jag blir helt förbluffad över hur i all världen kan man räkna på det viset. Alltså man har att inte ha det, man har det alltså inte som ett utfall utan man har det som ett bortfall. Och då försöker man i sina bortfallsgrupper, man gör sådana här enklare bortfallsanalyser där man gör på det viset att man försöker jämföra den gruppen som man inte hittar i några mått med ursprungsgruppen för att se om den systematiskt skiljer sig åt på något vis. Men vi hittade faktiskt en enda studie där det för att tillhöra den bästa utfallsgruppen så att säga specificerades att det var tvunget att patienten var vid liv. Alltså detta är obegripligt. Alltså det här är alltså i all annan medicinsk forskning så är det så att död är, som jag sa, ett oönskat utfall. Alltså det är det sämsta som kan hända när man hjärtopererar folk eller något sånt där. Det skulle inte falla någon hjärtkirurg in och räkna bort de som dog. Och en del av de här studierna som är så väldigt kända, den här schweizaren Lupchompis studie till exempel, den är han har en 30-årsuppföljning och om man räknar bortfallet där, man vet inte varför han inte får tag på dem, de är döda eller vad det är, så är utav ursprungsgruppen så säger han att, jag ser om man kan rita den. Han följer 1634 patienter och sen följer han dem under ett visst antal år, drygt 30 år. Och sen på den här så säger han att här har 40% ett riktigt bra utfall. Den här gruppen har det gått riktigt bra för. Räknar man från hans tabeller hur många det är, så är det, alltså räkna ner den, så är det 2,1% utav ursprungspopulationen. Alltså om ni var på en studie om, eller hörde ett föredrag om pankreascancer och någon entusiastisk föreläsare sa till er att i 85% eller i de 60% av alla som får pankreascancer har ett bra liv efter 25 år. Och sen upptäcker ni att det är så att 85% av dem har dött under tiden. Och att man räknar de som hade det bra, de som hade de outhärdliga överlevarna, då skulle ni tycka att ni är lurade. Men det är precis så som man har räknat. Det är precis så som Johan Kullberg redovisar resultaten, eller Alain Topor redovisar resultaten i detta. Och det är ju, alltså om det var så att överdödligheten var betydande och slumpmässig, om alla de här människorna som hade dött i förtid, om de hade dött av meteorer i huvudet som hade gjort, så då kanske man kunde göra det. Men jag ska inte tvinga, men alltså det finns Belfrags studie från 90-talet där han gör en 14-årsuppföljning och då tittar han på, och då är de unga människor, och då efter 14 år när man lägger ner Sundby sjukhus, 38% avlidna, 19% i suicid, 35% finns i kriminalregistret. Och då, ju yngre vid sjukhusets nedläggning, desto svårare situation. Den gruppen som var mellan 20 och 30 år när man la ner, då är 50% avlidna i suicid och eller finns med i kriminalregistret. Alltså det finns mer, Pelle Bülow gjorde en studie i Jönköping, han följde 134 patienter i 10 år och medianåldern när man startade det här var 34 år och 104 var under 30 år vid första kontakten med psykiatrin. Och utav dem är 28% avlidna och 33% utav dem avlidna i suicid. Det är alltså ingen slumpmässig dödstal. Jag ska inte gå igenom det här. De ser ut ungefär lika mycket. Alltså jag tar de här undersökningarna bara för att visa att det enda sättet att inte ha med död som ett mått är att man, om det skulle varit inte någon överdödlighet och den är slumpmässig. Det är alldeles uppenbart att den inte är det och därför då så blir de här jag ska inte, det är liksom, tar väl i lite för att visa hur korkat det är att inte ha död som ett mått. De här gamla studierna, alltså läser ni Glyn Harrison, Luc Chompy, Manfred Bleuler, Courtney Harding, så får man ju ett intryck av att det här är någonting som för en ganska stor majoritet av patienterna går ganska bra. Och då är det här gigantiska bortfall. Och man drar väldigt stora slutsatser på några få överlevare. Och oklara diagnoser, oklar design. Och SBU, när vi tittade på dem, säger vi tittar inte på någon. Att idag prata om Courtney Harding, Glyn Harrison, Luc Chompy, Manfred Bleuler i sammanhang som har att göra med prognos, det är humbug. Alltså det är humbug. Då vill man lura någon. När någon pratar Courtney Harding nästa gång, så då är det någon som försöker sälja en dålig bil till er. Alltså det har... Ja.
Får jag bara fråga, vad tycker du om Harrow och Andreasson då? Det är ju sena studier från 2012 och 2011. Så.
Andreasson har väl inte sysslat med långtidsuppföljningar?
Jag har ju här i min surfplatta en från Harrow då, som har gjort en lång uppföljning. Jo, men alltså vi har tittat på dem också. Vi har tittat på alla de här amerikanska studierna. Alltså i och för sig tar vi inte med... Och det vi säger är att det finns 50 sådana studier. Men som lider utav de här svagheterna. Oklara design, oklar diagnos, oklar uppföljning. Man har inte ens koll på hur mycket bortfall man har. Alltså vi säger då, man kan inte lita på de gamla studierna. Men den är inte gammal, den är helt ny.
Ja, alltså man kan inte lita på studier som är... Det är ju en långtidsuppföljning. Jag har läst den här studien, Harrows studie.
Andreasson då, hon lär med hjärnkrympning och mediciner och det.
Ja, men jag pratar inte om de studierna om huruvida hjärnan krymper eller ej. Alltså det är ju inte... De här studierna är... Jag ska berätta om de studierna, alltså de kraven som vi har och hur många patienter det är. Då är det inte 7 patienter som man har följt i MR-kamera. Alltså det som vi hade som krav på för att de här studierna att vi ska titta på dem, det är nyare diagnoser. Alltså att de använder ett nytt reliabelt, att det finns en klar redovisad design, alltså hur får man tag på sin grupp och hur följer man upp den. Att bortfallet är redovisat, alltså det här hur många, och att de har standardiserade utfallsmått. Och då så hittade vi 32 studier som hade gjort det med ungefär, och det är lite olika för olika utfallsmått, men ungefär 16 000 patienter som vi hittade. Och de flesta utav de där ligger i något spann 10 till 7 år ungefär, kan man säga. Tittade vi på kognition, alltså på neuropsykologi, så såg vi att gruppen som grupp har betydande nedsättningar både på enskilda domäner och på allmän begåvning. Att de fanns ofta hos gruppen redan som barn, att de finns tidigt i sjukdomsförloppet och finns redan då när de första psykossymptomen visar sig. Att kognition har en stark korrelation till funktion. För det har varit en sak som man har diskuterat. Är det så att man har en stark korrelation mellan kognitionen och funktionen? Och det är ungefär samma diskussion som man har haft om huruvida symptom har en korrelation till funktion. Och idag så tror vi att det alldeles givet är både symptom och korrelation.
Det är en korrelation till återfall. Och den här kognitionen är ganska stabil hos personer som har fått schizofrenidiagnosen som vuxna. Men det finns en undergrupp, de som har fått diagnosen innan 18 års ålder, som har en oerhört mycket sämre prognos vad gäller kognition och egentligen i alla avseenden faktiskt. Om vi hittar det. Och sen, det finns ingen forskning som antyder förbättring varken på kort eller på lång sikt kring detta. Sen vad gäller symptomremission, där är det så att den här skalan, den som i svenska kallas RSS, alltså som är en delskala ur PANS, Nancy Andreassons PANS-skala, den då är den har väldigt snabbt blivit the golden standard och som används i väldigt många av de här studierna faktiskt. Då. Och det visar att det är en ganska stor variation mellan olika studier. Det är inte ett stabilt tillstånd, det går upp och ner. Det är alltså inte något som man en gång för alla uppnår och sen har man det. Eller att man, även om man har haft en hög symptombelastning länge, så kan man ändå bli i symptomremission. För symptomremission betyder att man har så lite symptom så att den inte påverkar ens välbefinnande eller funktion. Man kan ha röst till exempel, men att den inte stör dem. Och då ser man att en majoritet har symptom som stör beteende och välbefinnande. Det är standardsiffran är kanske, precis som jag sa, att i nyinsjuknade så ligger de mellan, alltså den som uppnår 0 till 35. Det finns studier som inte en människa uppnår kognition. EPIC, den här stora australiensiska uppföljningen där man följde upp över 700 patienter i mediantid under 7 år, 7,2 år eller sånt där. Då hamnar de på strax under 30%. Och långtidssjuka så ligger kanske 35% eller något sånt där i en kronisk grupp har symptomremission. Funktion, där är det så att det finns inga accepterade eller använda mått, alltså som att alla har det. Man har funderat på, hittar man sådana här proxymått, men det finns inte några allmänt accepterade proxymått heller. Och de är extremt kulturberoende. Alltså man hittar studier där ingen arbetar. Det fanns några italienska nyinsjuknade studier där i stort sett ingen arbetade. Och sen finns det studier där 85% är i arbete. Det som är intressant är att till exempel Finland, där är i den här 1966 födelsekortstudien så är 40% i arbete på öppna marknaden. Det är 8 gånger mer än i Sverige. Det betyder ju inte någonting om att patienterna är annorlunda, utan att arbetsmarknaden är organiserat annorlunda. En väldigt stor majoritet visade bestående och stora funktionshinder, trots allt, även om det är väldigt olika gjort. Beroende av vård och stöd, en väldigt stor majoritet har betydande vårdinsatser, och även är det så att man har mycket så har ju mer utbyggt samhällsstöd är, desto stor andel av patienterna har någon form av stöd. Och att anhöriga förefaller stå för det mesta stödet även i utvecklade samhällen. Alltså det här är en sån här slutsats som man kan dra då. Och sen då recovery, alltså det här som ibland, alltså på svenska med återhämtning, som egentligen, man ska verkligen en varningsflagg för användandet av ordet här, därför att här är det i den kliniska bedömningen. I och för sig så är det att patienten ofta var med och bedömde det också, men det är inte recovery i den här betydelsen om patientens individuella resa mot några mål som hon bestämmer, utan mer det här kan man säga att att själva den sjukdomsbördan, eller hur man nu ska säga, har vikit. Och då ser man att, eller vanligt är att man slår ihop mått. Man ser hur många är i symptomremission, hur många utav dem har en bra social funktion, hur många har en bra självskattad livskvalitet och någon form av välbefinnande. Och vi hittade inte kognition med i någon studie kring recovery. Då, alltså det här är man neurokognitivt återställd också. Det hittade vi ingen studie som hade med. Och vi hittade också studier som tittade på hur stabilt är det här recovery. Det fanns någon norsk studie som visade att det var också något ungefär som remission som man gick in och ut ur. Nyinsjuknade gruppen hade siffror på, det här är de finska studierna och det här är en EPICs studie och det här är 5-årsuppföljningen på Opus. Alltså den som väl är bäst i världen på det, som vi hittade väl. Och långtidssjuka var någonting, alltså vi hittade, de flesta studier var väldigt lite, men kanske att det fanns då 10%. Och sen såg vi att om kognition skulle tas med, hur skulle siffrorna sett ut då? Då skulle de sett ut i stort sett att ingen hade uppnått klinisk recovery. Ja. Det var det.
Okay, sorry for the delay. My name is Stephen Austin. As Merete said, I'm a PhD student, and today I'm going to be presenting some results of my PhD project concerned with trajectories of positive and negative symptoms, a 10-year follow-up in Opus. It's quite difficult to see the slides, isn't it? So a little bit of background about the Opus trial for those people that don't know about it. It was a trial that was recruited patients between 98 and 2000, roughly 600 patients with a diagnosis of first episode psychosis were recruited to the trial. These patients had recently received a schizophrenia diagnosis within the F20 to 29 spectrum. They'd only received a maximum of 10 weeks antipsychotic medication, and they were randomly assigned to basically two different treatment arms, the specialized assertive early intervention treatment and the standard treatment. And the idea was to compare to see which treatment worked best. This is a trial where there have been many publications, and two of the main publications in terms of the results are listed there. What we found post-intervention, which ran for 2 years, is that those that were in the early specialized intervention did significantly better than the standard treatment. They had less symptomatology, they had higher functioning, and also they had less substance abuse and actually used less medication. When we went back at 5-year follow-up, that's 3 years after the treatment was ended, the differences on the main outcomes, that is functioning and symptoms, had disappeared. There were some other differences in terms of accommodation, but on the main outcomes there were no differences between the two treatments. And therefore we thought that because there were no differences at the 5 years, it would be a good idea if we combine the two treatment groups so we get one single large cohort of patients and we could examine how they're doing at 10 years in the 10-year follow-up. Particularly we're interested in something called trajectories, and trajectory basically is a group of individuals that are homogeneous or have similar outcomes on one particular measure. In this case we're interested in positive and negative symptoms, but significantly differs on other measures. The reason why it's interesting to look at longitudinal outcomes is they can assist us in the identification of factors that impact on illness, and also maybe can give us some more insight into the etiology of a particular illness. When we look at traditionally researching within schizophrenia, they're often cross-sectional outcomes where we call them dichotomous. We divide them up into groups, whether recovered or not recovered. If we're looking at symptoms, we might talk about those that are non-psychotic, those that are episodic, or those that have a continual psychotic illness. And why these studies give us some interesting cross-sectional information, they do have some limitations. Mainly, they fail to show us or reveal how psychopathology is manifested over time. And that is a very important thing to measure. The other problem sometimes when we dichotomize or divide these variables up into two groups is that it leads to an inefficient analysis of the data. And often we can lead to up to a third of the data being discarded. Luckily for us, in the last 10 years, but particularly within the last 5 years, there have been some statistical methods that have been being used within psychiatry, which can analyze these large data sets of continuous variables. And one such method is called latent class analysis. And what this does very simply is, instead of predetermining the categories of what outcomes should be, such as recovered or not recovered, this statistical method actually identifies how many groups within, say, if we look at positive symptoms over 10 years, how many different groups or trajectories are in that set of data. Now, there have been a number of other studies that have used this process called latent class analysis. 2 large studies were conducted, which when they go in and analyze to see how many different courses of symptoms or trajectories are there for positive symptoms, they found that there were 4 to 5 different trajectories. So people with schizophrenia, when followed up over a long period of time, they showed 4 to 5 distinct trajectories in terms of their symptoms. And the typical pattern was around 80% of these participants showed a reduction over time and then stabilization. And that's only when we're looking at positive symptoms. One of the weaknesses with these studies, which use very large data sets, was they didn't actually measure clinical symptoms. They looked at hospitalization as a proxy, as an estimate of how people's levels of clinical symptoms were. There are some other studies, 2 recent studies, I think one of them performed in Germany, which have used clinical evaluation of symptoms to try and construct trajectories. They also found that there were 3 to 4 different trajectories in terms of positive symptoms, but unfortunately the primary goal of these trials was to measure the effect of an antipsychotic medication, and they only followed up after 3 months. So that is also a fairly large weakness when we know schizophrenia is an illness that manifests itself over a long time. The other interesting thing when we look through the research is there's no studies, to our knowledge, that actually have examined negative symptoms over time. And so this is one of the gaps in the current research. So the aim for this study was to identify both trajectories and predictors for positive and negative symptoms using clinical data collected over a 10-year period. The design of the study. It's important to note that data that was collected systematically over the 10 years, and it was data both on clinical psychopathology, but also socio-demographic characteristics. And the data with the OPUS trial was collected at baseline, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, and 10-year follow-up. This is a list of some of the more major measures which you're probably familiar with. We used the SCAN which is a structured clinical interview to diagnose people. We used the schedule for assessment of positive and negative symptoms, the SAPS and SANS, to evaluate positive and negative psychopathology. And there were a range of baseline characteristics we measured, including duration of untreated psychosis and also premorbid functioning. At 10-year follow-up, everyone was invited to participate, but when it came to the analysis of the data, we removed those with an F21 diagnosis, which is schizotypie, and they were excluded from the analysis because these people at the time of inclusion had not experienced psychotic symptoms. And so that left us with a sample of 496 participants. So, on to the results. Here's a brief overview of the characteristics. The main thing I would probably note here is that the average age of the cohort when included in the trial was around 27 years. So what we're looking at here is an adult onset of psychosis population. There were slightly more males, predominantly an F20 schizophrenia diagnosis, and a third of the participants, or nearly a third of the participants at baseline, had a substance abuse diagnosis. So this is a fairly messy figure, but I will walk you through it very slowly. If you can recall, latent class analysis, what it does is it analyzes the entire data set and tries to identify how many trajectories best fit the data. And what we can see here is that for positive symptoms, there were 5 distinct trajectories identified from this statistical analysis. The first and the largest trajectory was called the response trajectory. That was nearly half, or 47% of the people were classified into this trajectory. And what we found here is that people showed a significant decrease in positive symptoms by 1 year, and it was maintained over the 10-year period. The second trajectory identified was classified as the delayed trajectory, and that was 12% of the sample. This group of people actually did show some slight reductions in the first year and that went up in the second, but the greatest reduction occurred between years 2 and 5, and then this was maintained up to 10 years. The third trajectory identified was called the episodic trajectory. These people displayed a significant decrease at year 1. There was starting to be a relapse at year 2, and this was also, they were back to baseline levels at year 5, and then again we saw this decrease up to 10 years. The fourth trajectory was called the relapse trajectory. So these people here, they showed a good reduction in positive symptoms at 2 years, and then we can see a slowly and steadily increase up to the 10-year period. And the final trajectory, which is the red line, and these people, they displayed significant positive symptoms throughout the entire 10-year period. And that was made up of roughly 13% of the sample. So what we can see here is there are distinct trajectories, with roughly half of our cohort achieving that, what we would call desired response of a reduction and being maintained, but there are many other trajectories that people can experience. When we look at the negative symptom trajectories, we identified 4 distinct trajectories. As you can see, when you look at or compare it to the graph of the positive symptoms, there's less variation in terms of the actual trajectories or the course. It was the first trajectory is called the response trajectory. They displayed a decrease up to 2 years, and that was maintained, and that's 28% of the sample. The second group was classified as delayed, so they actually only really start to show a decrease in negative symptoms after 2 years, and it continues to decrease to 10 years. The third trajectory is the relapse trajectory. It's maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic, but there is a decrease here at 2 years, and then when we look at 10 years, it's back to baseline levels, and that was 26% of the sample. And finally, we have the no response trajectory, and that again is roughly a quarter, or 27% of the sample, that show no real decreases in their negative symptoms across the 10-year period. Again, another very busy slide, but I will walk you through it. If you remember, the goal of this study was to both identify different trajectories for positive and negative symptoms, but it was also interested in trying to identify factors that could influence these different trajectories. And how we did this is we used a first two-step process. Firstly, we used a univariable analysis to identify all the possible factors that did significantly affect these different trajectories, and then we put these significant univariable factors into a multivariable model. And what that does is control for the influence of the others, so hopefully we identify that those factors that independently influence the different trajectories. So here we have some of the significant trajectories here, significant factors here, and here we have the 4 different trajectories for positive symptoms. We don't have the response trajectory, that's the reference category. So we're comparing these 4 trajectories to the reference category. So looking or trying to analyze these results very simply, we found 2 factors that were associated with worse positive symptom trajectories. The first one is duration of untreated psychosis, and what this is telling us is the longer people experienced untreated psychosis, the greater the chances that they'll experience a worse trajectory, whether it be relapse, delayed, episodic, or no response. The second other significant factor that influenced positive symptom trajectories was substance abuse. So people with a substance abuse diagnosis at baseline or at inclusion, it was associated with a worse trajectory both for a relapse and also non-response. So to say it in simple terms, if we look at just this here, those people that had a substance abuse diagnosis at baseline had a 6 times higher chance of actually experiencing a relapse trajectory. There are some others that are also significant, but I've highlighted the main 2 there. Predictors for negative symptoms, what we found was there were actually more predictors of negative symptoms when we did a univariable analysis. So there were more variables put into our multivariable analysis, and this is also reflected in this table here. But I will highlight 3 main factors that influenced worse negative symptom trajectories. Down the bottom, if you can see here, firstly, adequate social contact was associated with not having a worse trajectory. Poor premorbid social functioning was associated with having a worse trajectory. If we look here, if you had poor, this is rated, I haven't told you what this is rated, but this is rated, and a 10% decrease in functioning was associated with a 50% increase in being associated or having a delayed trajectory or falling into a no response trajectory. So that premorbid functioning in the social area was associated with much worse negative symptom trajectories. The second factor that we identified that was associated with worse negative symptom trajectories was a schizophrenia diagnosis. And here we can see that if you had a schizophrenia diagnosis, there was a 7 to 10 times increase that you would experience a delayed or no response trajectory. Finally, and quite interestingly, we found that disorganized symptoms were also associated with poor or worse negative symptom trajectories. And here it's between 2 to 3 times. If you had an increase, again I should explain, this scale is in a 1 to 5 point scale. A 1 point increase on that scale would result into a 2 to 3 times increase in experiencing a delayed or no response trajectory. Hopefully I haven't lost everyone by this point, but you're welcome to pose some questions if it's unclear afterwards. So what are the clinical implications of the results? Well, firstly, we found that those with positive symptoms did often display this reduction and stabilization pattern. But there were also others that did not show the desired effect. So obviously we could have focus on those that aren't getting that optimal treatment response within the first year. The other interesting thing is we identified that longer dupe and substance abuse was associated with worse trajectories. And these we like to think could be malleable factors. It is theorized, or it has actually been shown in one study, that it's possible to shorten dupe. And we could also maybe work on reducing substance abuse as a potential way to influence positive symptom trajectories. In terms of negative symptoms, disappointingly, we didn't see, if we remember what the graphs look like, we didn't see a great change in negative symptoms over the 10 years. They were fairly stable from baseline to the 10-year follow-up. But we did notice, or it was from the analysis, we did note that poor social functioning and disorganized symptoms were associated with worse trajectories, so they could be potential targets in treatment. When we start to look at the literature in terms of negative symptoms, there are actually very few effective or evidence-based interventions. Medication has been put forward as a good way to actually treat negative symptoms, but several reviews, including one by Stahl and his colleagues, have shown that the actually evidence is inconclusive in terms of medication reducing negative symptoms. A meta-analysis review conducted by Wykes and colleagues found that cognitive behavior therapy had been shown to have an effect on negative symptoms, but due to the nature of the studies, they weren't able to isolate how cognitive behavior therapy was actually influencing these negative symptoms. So it can be considered a promising or potential intervention. There are also a body of literature that says that cognitive remediation, training of people with cognitive deficits, particularly in the field of schizophrenia, can impact on negative symptoms. This review found that there was a small to moderate effect. And interestingly, in last year, Stefan Klinberg conducted a trial where he compared CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, with cognitive remediation, hoping he was actually using the cognitive remediation as a control group, but found they both equally were effective in reducing negative symptoms. And this led him to hypothesize or suggest what would happen if we combine cognitive remediation with CBT. Would that be an even more effective intervention on negative symptoms? It's probably also worthy to note that a Scandinavian researcher, Meller, or colleagues, they actually showed that they could reduce dupe, and when they did do that, it actually impacted or reduced negative symptoms. It's the actual only study that has shown where a reduction of dupe has been shown to impact on negative symptoms. But that could be another potential intervention that could be investigated. That's talking about preventing the development of negative symptoms before they occur. The other important thing to note from the results in terms of clinical implications is, if you remember, there were a number of people showing significant changes after the 1 or 2 years. And that would indicate that significant change is possible many years after diagnosis. And this means that maybe we should start to reconsider the timing and duration of our interventions. As in terms of Opus was focused, there was an intensive treatment offered for 2 years, and then people were referred back to standard treatment afterwards. The results from this study would indicate that possibly it could be beneficial to have more interventions over a longer duration of time. And currently there is a study being conducted between comparing 2 and 5 year intensive early intervention. I would also like to point out this with negative symptoms, because I think this is one of the main or most important findings. Is in another part of the project that I've been working on with colleagues, we found when we looked at predictors of predictors of recovery at 10 years, there were 2 significant predictors, but the most robust predictor was negative symptoms at baseline. So if you couple this with, so negative symptoms are extremely important in telling us how people will be doing in terms of recovery 10 years later, coupled with the fact that we don't appear to be influencing negative symptoms a lot, it's very clear that this has to be a major focus for research and clinicians over the coming years. As with all studies, there are a number of limitations. The first and probably major limitation with this study is that we use data from a randomized control trial and we combined them, and it's clear that the treatments would impact on these trajectories, particularly in the first 2 years. We also had a relatively small sample size to used with this statistical technique. 2 of the other studies I referred to before, which used hospitalization, when they had great big registers and they just noted if people had been admitted to hospital, they had sample sizes of 2,000 to 3,000 and 10,000. So this had a sample size of roughly 500, so it's much smaller, but it is based on clinical data. The other important thing to note in terms of sample sizes is that if you get larger sample sizes, it's possible that the 4 and 5 trajectories we've identified for positive and negative symptoms could break up into smaller subgroups. Another limitation was that the follow-up was not evenly spaced. If you recall, we followed up at 1, 2, 5, and then 10 years. And so therefore the trajectories between 5 and 10 years is only based on 2 time points. And so it's reasonable to say that this trajectory is an oversimplification of the variation of symptoms over this time period. And the other and final limitation is that there was missing data at the 10-year period, but throughout the study, and even though this statistical technique is robust despite missing data, the analysis showed that those that didn't participate of follow-up had slightly higher functioning and lower symptoms at baseline compared to those that participated. So it could be that we're overestimating good outcomes here, that we're seeing slightly more positive or optimistic trajectories than actually if we had the entire sample interviewed. So finally, in terms of things to remember from this talk, besides me turning up late, is that symptom course is heterogeneous or variable. I think this study has been quite good at demonstrating the different trajectories for both positive and negative symptoms. With positive symptoms, we have this pattern of mostly of reduction and stabilization. With negative symptoms, though, they're relatively stable over time. We don't see a lot of changes. And finally, significant change is possible many years after diagnosis, both for positive and negative symptoms. As with all studies, this is an incredibly large study. There have been many, many people involved in this study over the 10 years. I'd of course like to thank my project supervisors, Merete Nordentoft and Ola Moors. The people in bold have been directly involved in the 10-year follow-up, and I would also like to highlight Esben Butts Jørgensen, who was the statistician that actually developed a special model so we could make this analysis with our data, and he was very, very helpful in doing that. And finally, all the patients and personnel from Opus teams. That's it, yeah.
Well, I'll be the last speaker in this session, and I will also discuss a little bit from the Opus trial, but also something else. And the question I've put on this slide is, who do need long-term antipsychotic medication? And I think we have a discussion. I think when we heard Lennart's presentation, we had the impression that it will almost be everybody. And I think we will need to discuss whether that is the case. I think there's a strong evidence that antipsychotic medication is effective in treatment of psychotic symptoms, at least in the short, when we look at short-term trials. There's very strong evidence. And there's also a strong evidence that antipsychotic medication prevents relapse for patients with a chronic course of illness. So if you have people who are in community mental health centers who have been there for many years, you will find out that if you discontinue treatment, there will in very many cases be a relapse. But if we look at I think we lack evidence for long-term treatment of psychotic symptoms, especially if we include patients with first episode psychosis. And then, as Stephen mentioned, there's very weak evidence of about effect on negative symptoms. So in the next session I'm going to speak about life expectancy, and Urban Östby already mentioned that there is a difference in life expectancy for both men and women who have schizophrenia compared to the general population. And here I've listed the Danish data, where we have had a total population of everybody listed in the Danish Psychiatric Case Register with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. We have compared them to the people in the general population, and we have looked at life expectancy. And you can see that life expectancy for men and women in the general population, it's the blue bars here, and life expectancy for people with schizophrenia, men and women, they're really many years shorter. Of course, there are many different explanations for that. We have tried also to look at what do they die from? And they die from everything, is the brief answer. Here I see I missed the legends here, but here if they didn't have an increased mortality, they will have this level. There's a line here that should be 1. They should have the same mortality as people in the general population. This is observed expected. So you can see that there's approximately twice as high mortality from cardiovascular diseases, cancer, infection, diabetes, and other diseases. Other diseases, it's for instance, it's substance abuse is there. It's alcohol and substance abuse when that's listed as a cause of death. But it's also, for instance, diseases in the alimentary tract, your kidney, not kidney, but the liver diseases are there, stomach and liver. Also there are quite a few alcohol diseases over here. But what we can see is that people die from everything. And this factor is the most important, even though it's only doubled. It is the most important because also in the general population, a lot of people die from cardiovascular diseases. This is for men, and you see exactly the same pattern for women. That I don't need to go through it. I just mentioned that these are people with substance abuse, these are people with schizophrenia, and these are people with affective disorder. And what we can see is that people with schizophrenia and substance abuse, they have a higher mortality than people with affective disorder. Maybe due to lifestyle factors, but it could also be due to other issues. Then I'll mention that I had a student who defended her master thesis about this issue, cardiovascular and metabolic side effects to antipsychotic treatment. And yes, she was very clever. I've borrowed some of her results to create some discussion here. What she wanted to know which are the effects of antipsychotic medication on cardiovascular and metabolic risk factors in patients with first episode psychosis. So she found studies that were conducted with patients with first episode psychosis. And she wanted to look at weight gain, total cholesterol, and LDL and HDL cholesterol and triglycerides. And she did a thorough search of the literature and identified, after excluding a lot of non-relevant papers, she found 16 papers that could go into the analysis. And she included both observational studies, randomized clinical trials, and non-randomized clinical trials. And it was patients with first episode psychosis who had not previously been treated with antipsychotic treatment. And some studies were very small and some were very large. And then the follow-up was also rather different. And here's just how she listed. I'm not going to go through this, it's far too busy, but it's just to show that all the 16 studies were listed below each other. But then she did something more smart, I think. It was that she wrote every drug here, and then she found out, here are all the different 16 studies, and then first we looked at what were the conclusions regarding effect on weight. And here you can see that it's a very uniform conclusion that almost every drug, if there is any evidence, it shows that there's an increase in weight in all these studies. those with a star are the non-significant, but you can see all go in the same direction, upwards, none are going downwards. The dotted one is studies where weight is not measured. But you can see that it's not restricted to second generation antipsychotics. We have second generation risperidone, clozapine, amisulpride, but it's also, for instance, haloperidol is also associated with weight gain. So that was, I think of course I may have had some idea that also haloperidol was associated with increased weight gain, but I think it was, it made a rather strong impression on me to see that it was so uniformly across all studies. And you can see the same pattern. Now it gets more patchy because there are many studies that do not measure all these things that I'm going to go through now. Cholesterol, we have here effect on total cholesterol, but we can also see when it's measured, it goes upwards. And you can also see the same with LDL cholesterol. When it's measured, it goes upwards. And for HDL, it should be the other way around. Or if it goes down, it's bad. And you can see that it's not that convincing because some arrows go up and some go down, and we have a lot of stars, so it's not that convincing. Triglyceride, we see also that they are increased, and if we look at the different drugs, we can see that both for olanzapine, haloperidol, and risperidone, we have a lot of arrows that goes upwards. So I think if we should conclude across all the antipsychotic drugs, I think the main conclusion is that there are negative effects on weight, on total cholesterol, LDL, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides, but that there are some differences between different antipsychotic drugs, but maybe not as many as we had expected. So the drugs that were considered to be without side effects, maybe they were not that safe anyway. Then I had a second student where I'm going to explain what she was doing. I posed her the question, how could you explain this difference? And it was no coincidence that I posed this question. Could I have some water? Could you? Or maybe there's, you'll do something. Okay. I've been asked this question very many times, whether what these 20 years of lost life expectancy, how are they explained? Is this because of suicide? Is it because of lifestyle? Is it because of genetic factors? Is it because of side effects? And all these factors could be. So I asked her that question. This is a second meta. And she made this model, which I think is a theoretical model, which I think is very relevant to say that there could be lifestyle factors, unhealthy lifestyle. There could be side effects by medication. There could be unnatural death, suicide, and accidents. And then there could be somatic diseases that were not diagnosed or not treated. So at least these 4 factors. And then there might be a 5th one, which could be genetic influence. And I think that is true also, that there are some common factors that influence both psychiatric and somatic disorders, common genetic factors. But I think this could be some kind of a model. And she wanted then, what she was able to get data on were these. She was able to get data on prevalence of smoking, unhealthy diet and physical inactivity, sedentary lifestyle, and she was also able to get thank you. Thank you. She was also able to get data on which proportion had weight gain, dyslipidemia, and diabetes when they start to take antipsychotic medication. So this was estimated in population where patients were examined before and after start of antipsychotic medication. And it was estimated not only weight gain, but weight gain to more than 30 in BMI, 30 in BMI. And also diabetes, not only increase in blood pressure, but blood sugar, fulfilling criteria for diabetes, and also crossing the line where you call it dyslipidemia. Because some of the studies where you have shown that antipsychotic treatment increased weight, you could say that some people were maybe too thin, and it was not unhealthy for them to gain a little bit of weight. But what we do with this is that we only count if the weight is increased to more than 30 in BMI. So she tried to calculate how could we estimate how much of this lost years of life, how much of it was explained by different factors. How much of it was explained by smoking, how much of it was explained by sedentary lifestyle, how much was explained by unhealthy diet, and then medication side effects. And she used this formula. And we have also consulted statisticians regarding this formula. And they say that we're not allowed to add the figures, because then you can lose more than your age. You can, if we add the figures, at last you're not born, or you can, so that's not possible. And it also means that that when you have many different risk factors, it might create problems. But nevertheless, it is what we do here is we say in the general population. The life expectancy will maybe be shortened with 3 years for those who smoke. And then we say the prevalence of smoking in schizophrenia is 2 to 3 times as common compared to the general population. So this could be a factor 3, for instance. And then we will have these 3 years, and then we will multiply them with 3, and then we'll withdraw the life expectancy in the general population. Then we'll have an estimate of how many years was lost due to this specific factor. And we got this, now it has moved a little bit. What we tried to do was that we took different studies, because of course just such a thing as how many patients with schizophrenia smoke. It's not that we know the correct answer to that question. It's some people have investigated in one group and other in another group, and it is actually not that well investigated. But we found estimates that approximately 38% of people who took part in a Danish survey in 2010, they said that they had daily smoking, not necessarily more than 15 cigarettes, but they smoked daily. And then it was divided in whether they smoked less than 15 cigarettes or more than 15 cigarettes. And we could see that when we had the people who have themselves indicated that they had a long-lasting mental illness, we could see that we could get the results regarding the years lost in life expectancy due to the figures they have stated regarding smoking. And we could see for those who smoked less than 15 cigarettes, it was 3 years. Those who had a mental disorder and smoked less than 15 cigarettes, they would lose additionally 3 years compared to the general population. And those who smoked more than 15 cigarettes per day, they would lose 5 years. So we try to explain these 20 years of lost life, and we could say that at least some of it was explained by smoking, and it was a rather large proportion. We had a survey among people who were called socially disadvantaged, and they were found in shelters and drop-ins, and a very large proportion of those were smokers, and that was why they would lose such a large proportion, or such a large number of years. Then when we came to the diet, it was not that important. Either it's because there are more differences in diet than these questionnaires could capture, but it is not. You could see that smoking is much worse than unhealthy diet. And then we could see that there's this sedentary lifestyle. Sorry, this should have been moved over there. It's also important, but not as important as smoking. But of course, it's not healthy to be to sit still. That's what it means, that you are do not have you have a very low level of physical activity during the day. But then we looked at side effects to antipsychotic medication, and I think that was actually, I don't know if you'd call it a shock, but it was. I was surprised to see that it meant that much. Of course, we'll still need to think of all the limitations, but I think that at least you get a sense of the size of the problem. And it could be that if you, due to antipsychotic medication, have weight gain so that you will have a BMI more than 30, you will lose 2.5 years of life expectancy. And if dyslipidemia is induced due to antipsychotic medication, you will also lose quite a lot of years. These are 3 different studies, American studies, all of them, from where we had these estimates. And then if diabetes was developed due to antipsychotic medication, it would shorten life expectancy with 1.9 years. So it is important, and the reason why we take this big detour and now back to how long time should people with schizophrenia and psychosis be treated with antipsychotic medication, the reason why is that I think we should think that if it is possible, we should try to treat shorter and less. But of course, it should be possible before we could make such a decision. But I think it's not. When we've had this discussion, I thought until recently that we could say that most of it is due to undertreatment and lifestyle. But I think that the evidence shows that there's also some of it that is solely due to antipsychotic medication. And of course, there are a lot of reasons. I think that we have large Finnish studies demonstrating that it's worse not to take antipsychotic medication than to take it. That may partly be due to suicides. And of course, there could be a lot of good reasons to take antipsychotic medication. But I think these figures show us that there are also reasons to think of if it's really, if it's always necessary, and what can we do. So lifestyle factors and antipsychotic medications both play an important role in the reduced life expectancy. And can we change any of these factors? And of course, if we can change lifestyle factors, that's another issue, and I think we should take it seriously. I paid attention to Urban Östby, who mentioned that a quarter of the patients with schizophrenia has skipped smoking, so it's not impossible, and maybe we can push that development. And then I'll come back to some of the data from the OPUS trial, which Stephen also touched upon. We had 60% of those who initially had a psychotic condition. They had a stable response regarding psychotic symptoms at 5 and 10 year follow-up. And now I'll show the same figure as Stephen showed you. It's these people. The last 5 years, of course, we haven't looked at them at all these time points, but they had a stable remission. And then I did something else with these people. I tried to analyze whether they had medication or not. It's these people. Those who, when we had the 10-year follow-up, those who indicated that they have had no psychosis for the last 2 years, and it's approximately the same as this group. And we asked those whether they had antipsychotic medication, and 42% of them didn't have any antipsychotic medication. So I think we could say that some people with first episode psychosis will not need to have a lifelong prescription of antipsychotic medication. And maybe we do too little to find out who they are. We have a nurse now who is examining the 2 versus 5 year trial, where we investigate whether the intensive treatment should last 2 years or 5 years. And she also asked the patient when she meets them at 5 year follow-up whether they take antipsychotic medication. And quite a few of them say that, no, I don't, and you are the first one to know. because they, in some cases, they are afraid that they will be discharged from services and things like that. But I think that we will need to understand that some people are able to get successfully out of antipsychotic treatment, and we should try to help them with finding out who they are. And then there's a study which has been conducted in Friesland in the Netherlands, the Dutch discontinuation trial, with Lex Wunderink as the principal investigator. They conducted something they called guided discontinuation versus maintenance treatment in remitted first episode psychosis, relapse rates and functional outcome. The first paper was published in 2007 in Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, and now I've heard him give lectures several times about the 7-year follow-up, and it is in press in JAMA Psychiatry, so it's just about to come. But what they did, they included 131 remitted first episode psychosis patients, and after 6 months of positive symptom remission, they were randomly assigned to either maintenance treatment according to American Psychiatric Association's guidelines, preferably using low-dose atypical antipsychotic, or the discontinuation strategy, gradual guided tapering of dosage and discontinuation if feasible. And I think the conclusion, it was followed up after 18 months. And the first conclusion was that people did not stick to the treatment they were randomized to. Those who were randomized to maintenance treatment, some of them stopped, and those who were randomized to discontinuation strategy did not want to, it was not possible to discontinue them successfully, so they wanted to stay on medication. But that was of course it was the majority of those who were randomized to maintenance treatment followed maintenance treatment, and the majority of those who were randomized to discontinuation strategy followed the discontinuation strategy. And after 18 months, they found, as you might expect, that there were more relapses in the discontinuation strategy, 43% versus 21%, and that was statistically significant. So you could say that it had just proven what everybody had said on beforehand, that you should stay on antipsychotic medication. But I think there's more to it, because one thing was that they had relapses, but many of them did have, it was rather subtle relapses, and it was possible to get them back on track rather easily. So even though there was a relapse, it wasn't that bad. You could say that it was not, you couldn't consider this outcome as something completely, something very, very serious, because in some cases it was actually possible just to remediate it and increase the dosage again a little bit, and then they would be well off. But the more important thing, that of those who received the discontinuation strategy, 20% were successfully discontinued. And I think to help people with identifying those 20%, that's a good thing. And it could also be a good thing to be able to find out which is the minimum dose that you can do with. So I think we will need, of course may sound like if I am against antipsychotic medication, and I'm not, but I think it's a serious matter. It's not candy. It's really something with a lot of side effects, and we need to be really responsible in trying to help the patient, not only to how to start it, but also, if it's possible, to find out if it can be discontinued and tapered off. So I hope that we'll be able to replicate this study in Copenhagen, and there's a fund where you can apply for discontinuation studies, and it's not only within psychiatry, it's in all other areas where you also know too little about how long time should you take antihypertensive drugs, how long time should you take. Of course, in some cases it's clear, but there are a lot of things where you are uncertain about how long time should medication go on. Yeah, I think I'm about to, the conclusion. We will need to find out who can do without medication, and we will need to develop drugs with fewer side effects. I think that will be for the drug companies to do that. And we will need to further develop therapy that can be an alternative or a supplement to antipsychotic medication. That's it.